Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for February 28th, 2023. Today I'm going to look at what is the big picture that is in the vision of those who pull the strings of Biden, of Zelensky, of Rishi Sunak, Ursula von der Leyen, and so on. The ones behind the scene, what are they looking at and what are they trying to make sure you don't see? Now, there's a huge transition underway in the world, and that's because the unipolar order is collapsing. This Western neoliberal order, as it's known, is breaking down, and there's going to be a replacement for this. It's not clear yet what the shape of that replacement will be, but it's definitely underway and moving quickly. I want to begin by taking a look at what this post-Cold War model is, the so-called unipolar order, because there's a lot of discussion about it, a lot of confusion, partly caused by the World Economic Forum and its so-called Great Reset. But there are real aspects to it which are visible and which people can see and know about. But this post-Cold War order began with the fall of the Soviet Union and the proclamation among Western leaders who said that this represents the ultimate triumph of free market capitalism. The victory the victory in the Cold War came from the imposition of neoliberalism throughout the West and the inability of the Soviet bloc to keep up with it. And this led to organizations such as the PNAC, the Project for a New American Century, the so-called Wolfowitz Doctrine, George Herbert Walker Bush's New World Order, all of which came from the misguided notions that they won the Cold War. And this is known as technically liberal democracy, and the term liberal as in neoliberal, British liberalism, not the modern American version of civil rights and so on. But what is free market capitalism based on? It's based on the idea that there must be an end to sovereign nation states, that there should be a power shift away from governments into the hands of big private players, the people who run the interlocking corporate conglomerates or corporate cartels, whether it's finance, real estate, big pharma, the grain cartels, and so on, companies like BlackRock and Vanguard. They were the ones who made the policies through the banking system, including JP Morgan Chase, Citibank, and especially the policies that were adopted after 1985 by the City of London, the so-called Big Bang. And this included free trade, privatization, and deregulation. And what did these produce? Well, they produced bubble economies that put enormous amount of paper wealth in the hands of the golden billion, the richest people in the world, the billionaires. And it seems to work because the GDP seemed to go up. The goods and services that were lost through the deindustrialization in the West were replaced by cheaper goods from China and elsewhere. So it seemed to work, as long as someone else paid the price. Now, increasingly, as a result of deindustrialization, that is the looting through outsourcing, this has destroyed the Western economies. It's ground down the physical economy and physical production. It's represented a shift away from science and technologically progressive industry into so-called service economy, consumer economy, the entertainment society. And there's not providing enough, not enough manufacturing to allow for real economic growth. As a result, the bubble was created for the wealthiest. When the bubbles started to pop, we went into forms of quantitative easing, which just produced more money to paper over the debt in the short term, but continue the flow of money from the poorest into the pockets of the wealthiest. So that now we have a new bubble since 2019, which has created, again, enormous valuations for the corporate cartels, but inflation, which is robbing everyone else. And we're seeing the destruction of the US middle class, the destruction of the middle class now in Europe. where it used to be that a factory job or a job as a manufacturer in manufacturing could give you an income that would put you in the middle class, or construction, or areas such as that. These have been downgraded with lack of investment in infrastructure, lack of investment in new construction, except for casinos and sports centers. And so the consumer economy has been replacing the physical economy, and the paper and the speculative economy of derivatives and swaptions and so on has replaced investment in real physical production. So the result is that the others who were being robbed first included the developing sector. And there was a reaction. This is what was behind some of Saddam Hussein's policies of trying to pull together a replacement financial system to use trade in something other than dollars. Look what happened to him. Gaddafi, with his idea of a Pan-African gold currency. Look what happened to him. What were Saddam and Gaddafi doing? They were using oil revenues to invest in building the economy of their countries. Any nation that stepped out of line of this post-industrial order, the so-called rules-based order, was greeted with demonstrations, coups, assassinations, and wars. Now, it's true the US and NATO had enough military power to destroy Libya, to destroy Afghanistan, to destroy Iraq. But the present crisis is because they could not destroy Russia and China. So where do things stand right now with the economy? Let me just give you some figures and some facts from our daily update. The markets have entered what's called a death zone, according to a top analyst at Morgan Stanley, which is one of the top 4 investment banks in the United States: JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and Morgan Stanley. This investment analyst said there's been since October a speculative frenzy based on the bet that the Federal Reserve would soon end quantitative tightening and flood the markets with free cash once again. But the Fed instead is continuing to raise interest rates. Why? Because their policy is not stopping inflation. Inflation, according to Fed Chairman Powell, has been stubborn. Now then, look at Europe. According to a recent study by Bloomberg, the energy crisis will cost Germany $1 trillion by 2030 because of the loss of access to cheap Russian gas and the incredibly stupid energy transition policy imposed by the Greens, which means getting rid of nuclear and coal as a source of electricity. To reach their goals, what the study shows is they would have to install solar panels covering the equivalent of 54 soccer fields every day and build 27 onshore and offshore wind farms per week. Not possible. This won't work. As for the developing sector, inflation is taking a huge chunk, 75 or 99% in Argentina, 22% in Nigeria, Iran, 53% inflation rate, and so on. So what we're seeing is a destruction of the countries that were promised that they would benefit from this post-industrial economy. Instead, they're just being looted and their populations are being put into poverty and in some cases starvation. Now, the biggest problem for the West is Russia and China, because they have sounded a very resounding no to the plans of the unipolar order that they give up their sovereignty. They refuse to do that. And as a result, new institutions are emerging. And we have this from Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, in comments yesterday. He talked about a geopolitical tectonic process underway worldwide, in which 20 nations have now expressed interest and are applying to join the BRICS, that is the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. He said this is not a matter of mere organizational affiliation, but, quote, a global rebellion against colonial looting and the unipolar rules-based order, unquote. Lavrov continued, the countries which feel independent and are guided by national interests rather than somebody else's whims understand the ongoing developments as a geopolitical tectonic process which in fact encourages them to associate with the countries that they consider their like-minded partners. In this regard, we have a vast field for interaction with our colleagues. And Lavrov went on to say, we are now referring to these countries, which include Indonesia, Nigeria, Egypt, and others, Saudi Arabia. We're now referring to them as the, quote, global majority, which include giants such as China and India and many of our other international partners. That's what's happening. That's what's on the radar screen of the World Economic Forum elites, the ones who pull Klaus Schwab's strings. That's what's on the radar screen of the City of London, which works through British intelligence to destroy opposition to this global order. And that's who's doing the censoring in the United States, so you don't know about this. But here's the key point. It won't work. The Western model is dying. The neoliberal world economy is ready for burial. But the attempt to save it with war and austerity could kill you. Now, a final note on this. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was in Kiev yesterday to announce a $1.25 billion sum given to Ukraine to pay for their schools, firefighters, and doctors. And this is the first installment of a $45 billion aid package approved by Congress in December. So while you may not have transportation systems that function in your community, your hospitals are closing down or overcrowded, the schools are overcrowded, teachers are underpaid, we're giving up to $45 billion to run the Ukrainian economy. At the same time, we're sending them weapons to continue the war. That's the attempt to save the rules-based order. That's why there's an effort to destroy Russia and to contain China. Has nothing to do with the idea that these countries are our enemies. As a number of people, including Jimmy Dore, stated recently, Russia and China are not our enemies. The U.S. military-industrial complex and the financial conglomerates that profit from it, that's your enemy. So join with us to counter this. We're moving to create alternative organization in the United States, which will back a peace movement, which can fight for a durable peace based on a new development architecture. So thanks for joining me today. I'll see you again tomorrow.